right? Myko or Myko.ai?
Myko, you got it right. Right.
Myko. Yeah, it's good. You're the first, Trevor, AI startup guest we've had. We've had guests from like consumer electronics, crypto, media, like loads of different industries. But we're excited because you're the first like proper AI guest. So, and we're both kind of big AI enthusiasts. So I'm sure we're gonna have like a lot to talk about.
22 episodes in, first AI. That's a little counter trend. I'm a little surprised.
Yeah. It's good. Let's just start let's start with the most recent news because that's the thing that really caught my attention. Like when I was looking on X, like I saw you guys, you popped up there and Khosla Ventures is obviously like it's one of the greats, right? Like Sequoia and Benchmark, and just maybe explain a little bit about like how that came about, and you know, it's such hot news as well for you.
Yeah, so we actually had an old product in the market. It was an Excel add-in for quite some time, and in the summer of 2022, my co-founder and I saw all of these image generation apps like Dolly coming out, and it became immediately clear to us that natural language analytics would be the future of how people analyze their data. And so we actually built our own language model from scratch and released it 2 weeks before ChatGPT came out. So very lucky with the timing. Could not have done better from that regard. As you all saw on X, like lots of people were posting AI demos. We wound up going viral on a TikTok video actually that an influencer just like found us from, did a video on us, got like 400,000 views. It crashed our website at the time, massive amount of traffic. And we started really building out this like AI for Salesforce product, which is when we're fortunate enough to get the pitch with Vinod and wound up closing the deal kind of shortly after that.
Wow, it's amazing. There's a lot of luck involved there. Like when you think about it like that. Jake's done a lot of work with like TikTok influencers, and like he's got more insight into like the social side than me. But that's amazing, really. Like it's such a spontaneous thing to
The
happen.
funny part was we got our app when we did our launch of the first natural language layer. We got listed in this newsletter, Ben's Bites. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's a popular AI newsletter. And the influencer just saw the link from that newsletter and did a video about us. We didn't even know that there was a video, and we couldn't tell where the traffic was coming from because our app wasn't actually linked in the video. So everyone
Right.
was just Googling our product and then coming to our product from Google. So all of our search traffic was like, oh, you're getting overwhelming numbers from Google. And so it took us until that night, until somebody was finally like, oh, I found you on TikTok. We're like, TikTok? Like, we have
Yeah.
nothing on TikTok. What do you mean? And so it was a like serendipitous moment to finally see it and be like, oh, wow, this is why everything's going crazy today.
Wow.
I have a
Yeah.
question
There
though.
was no.
Did
Yeah.
you reach out to Ben? Was that like something that you had instigated through reaching out to Ben's Bites? I don't know who Ben is, so maybe there's a bit of background that we can go into there. But how did that come to be?
Yeah, so we reached out to him. I had been following him. This was like very early with this whole AI boom. So he was picking up a lot of the new product launches at the time. And was kind of like one of the first people reporting on a lot of them with this newsletter. So I had been like interacting with him on X during the time. And so when we launched, I kind of pinged him. I was like, hey, just launch this product.
Okay, so but
Nice.
you had awareness of Ben. I'm not plugging Ben. I don't know him, everybody. So I'm just curious about who Ben is. I've never heard of Ben's Bites, to be honest. So I think shout out to Ben. But is Ben's Bites something that's been going on a long time? Is it a newsletter that's quite active within the sort of AI product scene within your area of the world?
Yeah, so Ben Tossell is his name. I think he was formerly at Zapier before. I don't know when he launched it. Sometime in 2022, probably. So it's a relatively new phenomenon, but it really has been like blown up since the advent of this whole new AI wave. So a lot of the like new product launches for especially AI companies, it's a pretty hot destination to get listed in and to just keep track of what's happening in the market.
Yeah. Interesting. And so basically, like things blew up there, and then how does connect the dots between there and then Vinod Khosla? Like how does that go down?
Yeah, so we had been fundraising even beforehand. So we
Right.
ultimately had probably been rejected by every VC firm you've ever heard of over the course of kind of a year and a half of fundraising process. Obviously, once we built our first AI product, my co-founder is a former NVIDIA engineer. So he's got pretty serious, true machine learning chops, which really helped our pitch of why we were building this product. So once we had the AI product in market, we started to have significantly more investor conversations. And Vinod's chief of staff, Hassam, who actually is running company Archify now, reached out to us because one of his friends was using our product. So he kind of initiated the conversation, and then we took it from there.
Okay, and just as our audience have no awareness, probably, or maybe they do, they might have seen the TikTok video. What does your product do?
Yeah, that probably should have been the first intro. So we do conversational AI for sales and revenue data. So we plug in directly to your CRM, like Salesforce, and let people ask questions instead of going into Salesforce reporting, for example, and getting their data. So if you want to say like, what's our average sales cycle by lead source over the last 2 quarters, you just type that into a text box. We go get the data, analyze it, and return it back to the user. So you don't have to fumble around with dashboards or reports anymore.
That is extremely useful because I've used Salesforce, and myself and Jacob use HubSpot, and like these tools are horrid in terms of like the reporting and pulling stuff out. Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Does how the data is stored in the CRM system make a difference? Such as, is it like just connect an API, or do you have to work with the company face to face and understand how their data is warehoused and set up so that your tool can be more efficient?
A little bit of both. So there is an onboarding process where we have an AI that does a lot of mapping. So we'll say like, these are your custom objects, or like, these are custom columns that like we need to make sure we recognize. We go through and also pull out all the key terms. So any KPIs you have, if your organization defines net revenue retention a certain way, we're able to pull out that calculation to make sure that when you say that term, we know how your company defines it. So there is a bit of an onboarding process around that where we work with people to make sure that we understand the instance. But otherwise, we started with CRMs like Salesforce and HubSpot because the data is pretty structured and it's in relatively similar formats when it comes to like what's an opportunity that you're working on. So that gives us a lot of like a pretty high base floor that we can work with when we start getting into a new company for the first time.
And in terms of like spikes and pickups, what would you on average see? Let's say that Alex and myself installed this onto our CRM system. Do you have any kind of like lead time? How quickly does it get moving?
Typically we're like up and running within 2 to 3 weeks for customers. And then each question you ask has about like a 10 to 15 second latency. So you ask a question, you'll get your answer back within about 10 to 15 seconds.
Almost instantaneous.
Which is, it's still faster than the Salesforce UI, like, trying to find it in the Salesforce UI.
Especially if you got to download multiple reports, then you're really up the creek.
Yeah. Cool. And so what's the team like now, Trevor? Like, how many people? Is it just you and your co-founder, or did you hire anyone?
Yeah, we've got 8 full-time. It's mostly
cool.
engineers. So we have a pretty heavy technical team, multiple kind of self-driving engineers. So really like tackling the problem technical first of you ask a question, we give you the right answer and make sure it doesn't make something up or pull the wrong data. And so that's why the team's mostly technical. And then we've got a product manager and a product designer as well to really make sure that user experience is seamless. So you get into the product, we kind of guide you and help you through those first sessions to make sure it's intuitive and easy to use.
Yeah, and like we might go into this more depth, but the main kind of like way you guys get customers is through your website, or is it through like Salesforce Marketplace, or like what's the main kind of?
Mostly through our website. We did the raise announcement about 2 weeks ago at this point, which has been pretty solid for pipeline and lead gen, as you can imagine. And we have actually had some Salesforce sales reps put customers in front of as well, which has been nice since we're on the Salesforce App Exchange. So looking for, and then like as we're starting really our go-to-market, now that we've opened up for more general availability, I'm happy to talk through some of the things we're doing, but we're really, going out to get more customers now.
Yeah, and that's your job basically. You're marketing chief, basically. You're sales chief, marketing chief, a lot of hats.
Yeah, I'm sales, marketing, accounting, finance, legal, HR, whatever you want to call it, I'm there.
Sorry, go on, Jake.
I was just curious about the distribution of leads that come in. Like, is your website nearly all organic? I was going to ask, are you running any lead generation campaigns and emails? I personally think for these kind of products that email is still like a benchmark gold standard tool for finding and acquiring leads. But then having heard that your team is so small, I'm curious about how you manage that pipeline as well. There must be some sort of restriction on the bandwidth at some point with such a small team.
Yeah. So we're fortunate that we got a lot of inbound, so that we're still kind of like working our way through. And so setting up what that outbound looks like in those next steps, exactly as you've identified, we've started doing some email. It hasn't been as successful, I think, as we might have actually thought it would be. We've seen the sales professionals actually fairly reluctant to reply to cold email. And so we've been getting more targeted and thinking through more of these. I'm sure you've seen it's all over LinkedIn, like signal-based selling, right? Can we find people that are hiring for an additional rev ops or sales ops person on their team, which might signal that a tool like ours could help them with some of their capacity constraints? Can we pick up on some of those types of signals and do much more targeted outbound that way? And then really doing more content, both LinkedIn, podcasts, setting up webinars, like getting people within our community whose like brand names and reputations we can trust.
Interesting.
Yeah.
How,
Jake, do you want to go back a little bit? We always ask like guests, Trevor, like what's your kind of background in terms of like when you're growing up, your interests, like how did you get into this business? Maybe you can talk a little bit about that, like what led you to Myko today, like as it is, like and
I think I've always had a fairly competitive streak and then intellectually curious streak as well. So even back in like middle school, I don't know if you're familiar, there's a website that did a simulated stock market for sports players, like baseball players, football players. So you'd short them, you could buy them based on their performance. And so like things like that, I got like super into even when I was in middle school. And so it wasn't quite the entrepreneurial bug, but it certainly started opening my eyes. And then after undergrad, when I graduated, I was working in finance and was just bored out of my mind. So it was a big company, like very structured, lots of bureaucracy. It became very intellectually stifling, kind of doing the same thing over and over. I knew I wanted to start something. I wanted to build something.
Yeah. Everyone that's worked at big companies got like so many stories, right? We've talked about a lot in the past, like there's so much stuff you can talk about, right? You see everything that goes wrong in a big company. Like you see all the bad stuff, Well,
when you first get there, you're all bushy-eyed and you're like, oh, I can change this. And then, that slowly fades away as you realize, oh, I can't change this.
Yeah. Jake, your job at Walmart, you must have felt that like Walmart is like one of the biggest companies in the world, right?
Actually, I had a fantastic boss at Walmart who gave me a lot of room to maneuver. So I had a great time at Walmart. Genuinely one of the best places that I've worked. I was going to ask Trevor, I'm not trying to dox you, but what part of the world are you from?
So I'm originally from New York, Westchester.
Okay.
And so now
that's where you went to school and grew up?
Yeah, that's where I grew up. And then went to University of Miami. So came back down to Miami. Graduated Miami, came back to New York, worked in New York for 10 years, and now back in Palm Beach, Florida.
What was the move back? Was that just for the business, or is it, a sentimental place to you now?
It was a mix. My fiance and I came down during COVID. We were part of the migration from New York to Florida during the COVID wave, and it's been great since then.
Yeah, and in terms of your co-founder, like, where did you guys meet, and like how did that sort of develop into like a proper business relationship?
Yeah, so he was one of my classmates at Columbia. I went on a leadership expedition, as one does in business school, where a couple of my classmates, the whole trip, they're like, you got to meet Zhang, you got to meet Zhang, you got to meet Zhang. So when I got back from the trip, I had a first meeting with him. I kind of showed him some stuff I was working on. Like, I know a little bit of programming, but not much. So I showed him like 100 lines of code. It's like, hey, why won't this connect to the QuickBooks API? Like, I'm hitting like enter in this notebook, nothing's happening. He just kind of laughed at me, and he was like, you're not even in the ballpark. And so I started talking to him. We started kind of forming a relationship. Then we actually worked together on another startup he built that was automatically cut NBA player highlights. So basketball game ends, every single box score event for a player would automatically get cut into a YouTube video. So it became really popular for international players. You want to see every single Luka Doncic play, it's just now handling in one YouTube video. So we worked on that together for a little while. COVID hit. We couldn't get any partnership with the NBA or NFL. And I finally convinced him to kind of join me full-time on the company that was initially called Genius Sheets.
Yeah, and when you think about those type of like startups, like it's almost like a B2C media play, right? Like it's very hard to monetize that, I guess. I guess eyeballs on YouTube or whatever. But
especially
hard
you can't monetize without explicit permission from the NBA or whatever league you're doing. So when we had a contact there who was like, I would be the perfect person. Like, I'm your intro. He's like, I can't get you a meeting for the next 6 months. Best case scenario with COVID going on. And so we were kind of like, okay, well, that doesn't leave us many avenues.
It's very interesting that like left brain, right brain thing. Like you, your co-founder, he's more on the technical side, and like he's like, I just want to build this like MBA cutting tool, and then you're thinking from the business side, like that's not going to work. It's very smart what you guys have done. Like you've taken his talents, technical, and you've taken your talents on the market and sales side, and you put that into the current startup. So it's kind of cool how you guys kind of figured that out, and then moved on to the next thing. But why? I mean, apart from the AI wave, like why specifically did you guys focus on like B2B and sales? Like, there's a lot of these tools now. Like, I actually tried Apollo the other day, like using Apollo with actually an upcoming guest. He's like a expert in Apollo. There's loads of these tools. So why specifically like this market you guys decided to tackle?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because the initial product we built, the language model from scratch I talked about, was initially connected to the QuickBooks API, so accounting data for like SMB finance teams. So that was the product we had in market. It was like an Excel add-in to help financial modeling. We built this initial model. We realized like, holy shit, people love this. Like people love being able to just like to type in a text box, get their report from QuickBooks. But it was like a parlor trick. Everyone was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then we were like, how much are you willing to pay for it? Like how much of this, like of a business problem does it solve? People would be like, yeah, not that much. They'd be like, it's super interesting though. And so we had this like hunch of data analytics would be done in this way. We knew that this new conversational text layer would be the way of the future. So we began really searching for, okay, what is the optimal use case for this? I had a background doing some sales and some business development from my time working at startups. And so we started like putting it in front of salespeople and being like, hey, like, what if you could just get your reports this way? We did the same for HR people, for finance people, really just trying to see, where the pitch started landing. And over with kind of sales and revenue teams, we were getting the feedback of like, oh, wow, this would be really powerful.
I have a question. How long did that take you from the moment that you started? You've got together, the band gets together, it decides that you're going to focus on this project. From initiating the project to going through all those different testing phases, talking with the different stakeholders, how long before you settled, and what sort of time, what duration did that take in how many phases?
Yeah, it's lots of phases. So we started the company originally in August of 2020. We built this like Excel add-in product for 2021 and the beginning half of 2022, where we actually got a partnership. We were one of 5 companies to partner with Intuit. So we're still listed as a featured app in the Intuit App Store. We built the first AI layer in October of 2022, which is when my co-founder Zhang came on board full-time. So he left the job he was at. From October 2022 until April 2023 was us iterating on this, like, who is the right target persona, buyer, and like, where's the product see a tool like this? And then once we raised the seed round from Khosla, which was April 2023, now it's been just building the product and then talking to as many people as possible, making sure A, it's the product that people want, and B, what features do we need to add? Where should we start?
Yeah,
I guess that takes me on to the next question, really.
Yeah.
I was curious about what's the roadmap. Have you thought about doing voice?
So we've thought a lot about doing voice, but it also feels like that's more of a parlor trick for the short term. Like if I were to go to a conference and give people like the ability to do this over voice on like a big projector, like that would be a magical moment. I don't know what that adoption is really like for people like sitting in their offices using voice versus just like texting. I think like our big roadmap is one, just increasing the capabilities. So what types of questions can we answer? How advanced are they? The number of systems that we integrate with. So right now we're Salesforce, HubSpot, and then the data lakes like Snowflake, Redshift, BigQuery. So expanding the number of connections we have. And then over the long term, the play of this is an AI agent that sits on your shoulder, knows you, knows your business, knows your data, that you can say like, hey, I want to figure out how to close more deals next month. And it can give you recommendations for, things to look at, things to analyze, and then actually do those actions for you. It can actually say like, hey, do you want me to run a campaign for these types of buyers that have recently left a review on G2? Whatever it is, like really being that end-to-end platform that sits on someone's shoulder can make them more productive, specifically understanding what is the source of truth when it comes to your sales and revenue data, because that unlocks a lot of capabilities.
Yeah, and I guess the cool thing with you guys is you're not kind of you're not like a vendor like Salesforce. You're not platform dependent, so you could potentially like work across all the different platforms. That's quite powerful concept.
And that's how we try and stand out. Well, I shouldn't say try. That's how we stand out when we think about like what does our roadmap look like. All of the big companies are relatively like platform like locked, whereas like our main goal is to be cross-platform.
Yeah, interesting. We are a marketing podcast, so we got to talk a little bit about marketing. Like, what's your opinion on like brand? Like, because I don't know where the name Myko came from. Like, myself and Jake are interested in branding, so like, how did you guys settle on that name, and like, what do you think about branding in terms of like software? Because we worked in hardware, and there's a lot of focus on branding hardware, right? Like physical goods, but software, it feels like it's not as important. But yeah, just some more background on the name and on that side of it.
Yeah. So the company used to be called Genius Sheets, which like it was an Excel and Google Sheets add-in originally. You can kind of see how that makes sense. As we started building this AI product, we knew we had to change the name. We knew we wanted to do two things. We wanted to be short, we wanted to be memorable, and easy for people to say, pronounce. So those were kind of the criteria we were searching. How we ended up coming up with Myko, my fiance was helping me think through names, and we kept going through examples. And I kept coming back to the visualization of the like underground network in plants that transfers proteins to one another, that like communicates amongst the network. And so the mitocortisol network underground is the like longer name form of it. And so, we started doing searches, saw that Myko, spelled slightly differently, but like one of the variations was available. It was short, it fit the narrative. And ultimately, as we do start growing our branding, I think there's a lot of creative ways that we can start working that in and get more creative with it. I think to your point, like branding is very important. I think it's more of I wouldn't say luxury, but as we grow and have more resources, I think it's something we'll focus on more as we develop more maturity, right? So we have some branding now, but we're relatively limited in terms of like, I'm working on the branding. As we keep growing and as we kind of prove out the product market fit of the actual software, that's where I think the branding becomes really important, especially cutting through all the noise of, especially a product like this. There's a lot of sales tools. And so how do we stand out? How do we create that brand name recognition? It was very, very important.
I have one question. Who are the personas that you've identified? You've gone through the process, you've iterated it down, you've created this cool brand name. So who are we targeting? What are the personas that you've identified that utilize your tool?
Yeah. So right now, most of it is kind of sales leadership. So CROs, VPs of sales, and then somewhat probably like 33%. We have a little bit of a split persona of the like rev ops and sales ops analyst for those sales leaders. So these are companies typically between 50 to 250 people initially that we're targeting. They have that rev ops sales ops team in place. So they've thought about the data, the structure of their CRM. They want better access to that data. And typically also they work at technology companies with, sales teams that have a pretty high velocity of deals. So we're not targeting teams that are doing, each rep doing 5 deals a year for $1 million each. We're targeting sales teams that might have 40 reps each with an ACV of, 5,000. So they've got lots of deals in their pipeline at any given time.
Yeah, makes sense. Um, and in terms of like your culture there, like this is like an important time for you guys, right? Because you're just starting like to build out the team. What's your kind of opinion on culture? Because this is a topic we've talked about a lot, especially in the context of like Asia. Like the Asian culture is very different to like the Western business culture. So how do you think about that? Like remote versus in person and like digital versus analog and all that stuff.
Yeah, we've been doing remote. We have a software called Roam, which is like a virtual HQ that's been tremendously valuable for us. So everyone has a little like box in an office. You can see them, you can jump into people's offices. If you come into my virtual office, there's a bunch of pictures of my family, like the things I like to do, books I read. Makes it a little bit more personalized. So people go on Roam tours. I think we think about culture a lot. And it's like, what is the type of organization you want to have? How do you want to interact with people? How do you create a zone of safety for people to try things and fail, while also recognizing that we're an early stage startup. We're in a hyper competitive market. We got to move fast. We have to ship things. We have to be ultra competitive. And so it's like finding the right balance between, what is the cultural values that we want to hold. One example, when I'm talking to people like we probably more closely to a lot of the Asian cultures, we think of ourselves as a sports team. We want to hire the best people on the market. You're here to absolutely knock it out of the park and win championships. But it's a little bit different than the typical like, hey, we're a big happy family culture.
Yeah.
And so it's something that we've tried to emulate and has resonated with a lot of our early hires who see themselves as kind of top performers and are given that opportunity to really shine in that environment.
Yeah, it's definitely the
How do you
happy family
distinguish a
feel.
high performer?
Yeah, so I mean, most of them are on the engineering side. Just be like most of our team is on the engineering side, and so a high performer to us is somebody who is incredibly capable of thinking from first principles about any problem, and not starting with necessarily the given solution or like the expected way that they should do things. So one example is we were struggling with something for a couple weeks, months. GPT had one of their announcements, like the Assistant API, for example, last year. I think it was November. Same day, we basically shut down what we were doing and did an internal hackathon for everyone on the team. Just play around with it, see what it could do. Take a first principles approach and say, if we hadn't started this company, if we hadn't been working on anything for the last year, if today was your first day and this was the problem you had to solve, what would you do? And had our engineers, everyone work on just different creative solutions to think through like what that would look like. And it helped us. We had a number of people think of incredibly creative new ways that we ultimately combined, brought everyone together, and wound up solving the problem in a pretty significantly improved way. So that ability to really think through the underlying problems and challenges from scratch is really important to us as a whole, as an organization, as we think about like, what does a top performer look like? It's somebody who doesn't need that supervision and can really go out and fundamentally change what our either product roadmap looks like or what our technical capabilities are.
And you talked about challenges there. Yeah, we're reaching the end of the podcast now, but we have to talk about what are the highs and the lows. So what have been the biggest challenges so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's one, just like people management, like always staying on top of the team, creating good culture, creating an environment where you're able to keep moving the ball forward while knowing you are under stress, right? We raise money from top investors. We have to build a $10, $100 billion company. And so that's the journey we've all signed up for. I think we're extremely excited about the mission. But when you think about like the challenges or where some of the like what startup life is, it's getting told no 100 times and then getting that one yes and having that make your entire month. And so just being kind of relentlessly optimistic. And then on the highs, it is getting that one yes, right? You get that one customer to sign up. You get the influencer who loves your product, who does marketing posts about you. All of those little things in the sea of like rejection and challenges make it all worthwhile.
Yeah, true. We're actually, I'm in a conversation with probably one of the most famous startup founders in Silicon Valley history right now, and it's like that kind of thing. It could go either way. It's like he might not do it, he might do it, and it's like if he does it, like we're gonna be at cloud nine. Cool, Jake. Anything else you want to chat about, or it was very interesting conversation.
Caught me off guard there, Alex. You passed the ball to me there. I wasn't quite ready for it. You've put me on the spot. I don't have anything that's springing to my mind right now, but I had loads of questions a second ago. I was just really thinking about the future. Really, I guess we'll keep up the vibe of positivity, optimism, looking forward to the future. Maybe a little bit of delusion mixed in there as well. But what's your next goal, and what are you most looking forward to?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll take where you were going with it anyway. And we have a pretty strong thesis that AI isn't going to necessarily replace people. AI is going to replace the pieces of your jobs that you hate, especially over the short run, like next 5 years or so. Most of the disruption is going to come from people starting to utilize AI to really make their jobs and parts of their life more beneficial. If you think about kind of even where we are today versus where we were when ChatGPT came out, to me, I use it for everything, right? It's like a daily part of my workflow. Most of the world is not like that, right? Like AI has not stolen all of these jobs yet. And so it's going to be another kind of like technological shift in terms of how people work, where people work, what those jobs are like, the types of jobs people have. But I'm optimistic about the ability to really help people spend less time doing a lot of that manual rote work that they frankly just don't enjoy anyway.
It's crazy. When we started this pod, we use a software called Riverside, again, another highly valued startup. And you literally record the video on Riverside, and then everything else is done in Final Cut on local. And literally in the last few months, like Riverside is basically almost automated in terms of editing and production. Like it's changed so quickly, like across like every app pretty much.
I forget the name of the app, but there's an app that Jason Lemkin talks about on his SaaStr podcast that he uses to cut all of the like podcast videos for socials, like YouTube videos, TikTok Reels. He's like, you just put it in. It's better than what 95% of people could do and significantly cheaper. It's not as good as if you hire someone to like really do it, but it'll get you good enough that you can post.
Yeah, but the lucky thing is marketing is creativity. We still need human creativity, so we're not fully redundant.
I think humans will be a differentiator in the future, to be honest. If you can get a strong human talent, it will differentiate you against, because I'm not here to offend anybody in the final send-off. AI sometimes can be a little bit generic, a little bit high level, so that, especially if you're using tools like GPT, Gemini, you don't really get something that's unique. It doesn't turn out an idea that's particularly abstract, even if you asked it to, because it's based upon, I guess, somewhat logical principles. So I do think that human beings, right now, our stock might be a little bit undervalued, but in the future, I think you'll see human-based companies as well rise to the top, being differentiators that they're not based on AI.
Yeah, we're not going anywhere yet.
No, not cool, just man. Yet, anyway.
Yeah, no, that was really cool conversation. Just to let the audience know, your website is Myko.ai. Is that correct?
That's right.
Myko.ai, and then across all the socials. Yes, Myko. We'll link it in the description. Good to have you. All the best with the remainder of the year. We're already 25% through it already, pretty much. But yeah, all the best, Trevor. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, guys. It's
Thank you,
been great.
Trevor.
Enjoyed it.
Pleasure.
See you next time. Bye-bye.
See you next time, everyone.